So, to give a brief introduction, before we actually start and we give the floor away to you, Niary, we have Dr. Niary Gorjian Tamamian here, and she will be speaking about the hardships. We know that there are difficulties now with everybody working from home. It's sort of a lot of foot traffic going on and not a lot of space to do a lot of work that we still have to keep up with. So thankfully we have Niary here who was able to give her time, and she will be discussing with us the ways, her proven methods, as you know, as a professor and all her work, all her time in her profession, on how best to mitigate the stresses, how to be efficient, how to work with our team, and still manage efficiency and success while we're working from home. Okay, so take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Suzanne, for the introduction. Welcome, everyone, and thank you to AESA Leadership globally for inviting me to do this presentation for everyone. It is a great pleasure of mine to bring to all of you the world of positive psychology and workplace scholarship during this time of uncertainty, we shall say, when we're all juggling so much, from telework to homeschooling to our daily household duties, all of which are disturbing our daily routines, as we try our best to manage the not so pleasant feelings of perhaps depression, anxiety, frustration, maybe due to job loss or pay cuts, which have been common these days. So I've titled today's talk Flourishing During the New Normal. And flourishing means to thrive, prosper, and grow. You're probably questioning, how could that be? How am I going to flourish in a pandemic? And my answer is, it is certainly possible. Based on empirical research, we can all flourish even when we endure disruptions and hardships in our life. So let's talk about how that's going to happen. So the father of positive psychology, Dr. Martin Seligman, stated, the goal of positive psychology is to increase the amount of flourishing both in our life and in other people's lives. He then asked, so what is human flourishing and what enables it? To answer this question, given decades of empirical research, he developed what's called the PERMA theory of well-being. Hence, the words flourishing and well-being are usually used interchangeably. PERMA theory of well-being includes 5 building blocks, which we also call the 5 pillars that enable us to flourish in life, which are when we increase the amount of positive emotions during a day, when we're engaged in the work that we do, when our relationships are strong and meaningful, and when we do find meaning in everything that we do, and therefore have a sense of accomplishment basis. Those are the 5 pillars of well-being.
Excuse me, Niary, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We are getting comments that it's a little harder to hear you, so if you could speak directly into the mic.
Oh, boy.
Yes.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Okay. Is this better or no?
Hold on one second. Can we have a tester?
Is this better?
Yes, that's better. Just try and maintain that, please, if you could.
I'm going to have to hold a microphone like this.
Oh, okay. Well, tape it up there, I guess, if we have to, but...
tape it to my chin.
Yeah. I know, right? But I think we're starting to hear it much better. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, I'll be very cognizant of that. Okay, thank you. Let me know if it happens again.
Go ahead. Yes.
Okay. So the American Psychological Association has numerous articles. I'm so sorry. I skipped the slide. So how can we, so today I'm going to talk about, my presentation is going to focus on how we can flourish and thrive to keep our well-being high, given the research, advice from scholars, and daily exercises that are based on empirical research. I'll also talk about how to deal with the stresses of remote work, such as online communication, keeping our relationships alive, and how to manage remote teams if you are a leader. And briefly, I'll touch upon keeping unity in the family. So well-being, the American Psychological Association, their link at the bottom of the slide, has numerous articles and research studies on their COVID-19 resource page, ranging from parenting to homeschooling and just overall surviving this pandemic. The advice I saw on their site really points to the importance of 3 elements, which are wellness is the first one. They really initiated or spoke highly about the importance of meditation, watching meditation videos or podcasts, and I'm sure we've all heard continuously about Deepak Chopra, mindfulness meditation, and many others that have popped up in the past. The American Psychological Association also pointed to the importance of spending time in nature to foster some wellness within us. Gardening, walking in the park, all of these were found to really contribute to our mental health, emotional well-being, and surprisingly enough, to sharpen our cognition. A second piece that I noted among the many research articles posted on the APA COVID site was the importance of staying connected with loved ones and friends. And once again, we see the importance of relationships, just as we saw relationships being an important pillar in the PERMA model. So how can we use technology to keep our conversations and relationships meaningful? Well, instead of doing a Zoom call with a group of friends and colleagues, we can always do a one-on-one call, right? Which I'm sure many of you are already doing. Or, instead of talking about just chit-chat of how was your day, we can have those meaningful and deep conversations with our coworkers, with our friends, family members. So use the technology to make it more meaningful for your relationships and for you. And third, APA really said it is so important to show compassion to yourself and others, and I cannot approve of this more so than they have stated how important it is. If, for example, if your spouse is, waking up a little bit later than the 8, 9 o'clock a.m. routine, try not to be too harsh or judgmental, and really know that they are experiencing discomfort throughout this pandemic, just as you are. So demonstrate that compassion. And just likewise, so show compassion to yourself. If you happen to miss a deadline or you do sleep in, it's okay. Be kind to yourself. Or your coworkers. If a coworker has a child who barges into a Zoom meeting, I don't think it's appropriate for us to judge. We should demonstrate some understanding that our colleagues, just as you or I, are doing many things at the same time, and juggling many elements is quite stressful. So again, showing compassion to one another and ourselves is the third element that American Association points out for us to be to. So with relationships being one of the main pillars of flourishing, and APA also citing and highlighting the importance of keeping relationships alive and meaningful, I find it important to take into account social psychologist Al Goy's 2019 on positive interpersonal processes, which reminds us of the behaviors we should do more of, especially during shelter in place, to keep our relationships strong. Al Goy defines positive interpersonal processes as the social dynamic in which one person's thoughts, feelings, and behavior change another's behaviors, thoughts, feelings, fueled by positive emotion. So what are some examples of positive emotion-fueled moments that are known to be common in high-quality relationships?
Niary?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, if you could just hold it up there, or maybe just speak louder in general, because it is going in and out. I apologize. Yeah, just want to make sure everyone's getting this information.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
No, okay. Yeah, that's better. If we could keep that.
Okay, I'm going to hold it. Okay. So examples of positive emotion-fueled moments common in high-quality relationships are: amusement is one. Examples, for example, amusement, particularly shared laughter, emotionally connects us. One particular study found that new acquaintances who knew nothing about each other, who laughed together simultaneously, liked each other more because the shared laughter caused them to see themselves as similar to one another, hence uniting them. Second, joy, the sharing your good news with others and being genuinely joyful for another person's good news also emotionally bonds us together. And third, and of course, vastly studied concept, gave me an annotation. Is requesting to annotate the shared content.
I'm sorry, you're getting a message?
Yeah.
Who is from, is it from someone in particular?
Dev, I guess, is a participant, is requesting to annotate the shared content. You cannot control the shared content until you stop the decline. Sorry, I don't know what that means.
Disregard that for now. Don't worry, keep going.
I just declined it. I'm sorry, because I don't know what it means.
We want to hear that third step.
Oh, again. Okay. Anyways, gratitude. People who do things for one another, I mean, we always do things for one another, obviously, but the action of someone doing something for us usually goes unnoticed or unappreciated because that action was just expected, right? So, however, if we demonstrate gratitude towards a friend, a spouse, or a colleague, we draw attention to the kind person, recognizing that he, she understands my needs, which emotionally binds us more. So these are the three behaviors we can purposefully engage in to foster positive emotion-fueled moments in our relationships. And remember, relationships was one of the pillars of well-being in the PERMA model, and APA, American Psychological Association, highlighted the significance of relationships being strong during this pandemic. So, with well-being, So not only is gratitude important for fostering strong relationships, but also highly important for our well-being. Dr. Martin Seligman, in his book, Flourish, 2011, speaks to two validated exercises known to significantly increase well-being. And both interventions are validated in a random assigned placebo-controlled design. So the first activity is called What Went Well, or the Three Blessings exercise. To engage in this exercise every night for 1 week, write 3 things that went well today and why they went well. For example, my husband did the dishes today in between his conference calls. Why? Because my husband is thoughtful. Doing this activity just for 1 week was found to significantly lower depression 3 months later and increase happiness through 6 months. Second exercise is called the, again, exercise that's scientifically proven to increase wellness is a character strengths exercise. In 2005, scientists Dr. Seligman and Dr. Peterson developed and published the Values in Action Inventory of Strengths to measure 24 character strengths known to be universal across all cultures. The picture of me on the right is from 2003 with Dr. Seligman in the middle and Dr. Peterson to the right, discussing my research study, which examined the effects of certain character strengths in the workplace. And actually, thanks to these amazing high-level scholars, Dr. Seligman and Dr. Peterson, I developed a strong passion for the field of positive psychology. Hence, to make this talk a little bit more meaningful for me also, I've included this picture. The picture has nothing to do with me developing the VIA. All credit goes to Dr. Seligman and Dr. Peterson. Each of us possess all 24 character strengths in different degrees. Character strengths are different than personal strengths, such as our unique skills or talents and interests that we each have. During this time of physical distancing, I recommend trying this exercise. For 1 week, use 1 to 2 of your character strengths in a new way with a clearly defined opportunity to use it. For example, if hope and optimism is a character strength, consider writing a blog expressing hope about the future post-pandemic. This exercise was found to significantly lower depression 6 months later and increase happiness through 6 months. And you can take the assessment for free at the website noted on the slide. Research demonstrates that intentionally using our dominant character strengths helps to improve our relationships, enhance well-being, and overcome hurdles. And also, once you take the assessment, it'll give you the order of your 24 character strengths, and the first 5 character strengths are known to be your greatest source of well-being if applied on a daily basis. Now let's turn to the topic of remote work. Gallup finds that remote work is on the rise, with 39% of the US workforce reporting working remotely at least some of the time in 2012, which rose to 43% in 2016. And now, April 2020, we have 62% of US workers working from home. Gallup quotes, while COVID-19 won't be an issue forever, remote work will be. It might actually be true. As people are experiencing the pleasures of working remotely, they might opt to work remote all the time. So we'll see what happens in the future. But Gallup projects that it is going to become common trend.
And how do you feel about that as a professional in seeing this day in, day out? Do you think it's a recipe for disaster?
The remote work? No, I don't think it's a recipe for disaster. I think it's just a different way of working, and it will take time to get adjusted to it and learn how to create new routines to be productive while engaging in remote work, how to be more effective as a leader in managing your team remotely. I mean, there's going to be a lot of new learning and new customs being or routines to implement when we start going full on remote for the next 10 decades. There's going to be new conventions and new concepts and new theories and new research, so I don't think it's a recipe for disaster. I just think
a transition.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just the transition. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Gallup Analytics seriously has spent 12 years studying remote work, which yields data showing that great leaders who manage teams virtually can really combat isolation and increase engagement of their employees if they communicate, set clear expectations, and individualize. So I want to take a closer look at each of these. Communicate means basically Gallup refers to employees who are accustomed to working from home, may certainly feel cut off from resources, information, and relationships. Which they need in order to do their job well. So leaders and managers should plan for more frequent calls. But I should note, more frequent calls should be appropriate to each individual. Some employees may need more frequent calls to remain engaged, while others can do just with one communication a week. So to engage remote workers, Gallup research found great managers to be more intentional about having frequent, meaningful conversations, and using technology to keep that team or organizational culture alive. Gallup research indicates that frequent communication contributes to the greatest improvements in employee engagement during remote work. So if we look at the second important factor noted in Gallup research as contributing to effectiveness of management, setting clear expectations that are achievable for each individual. Obviously, to hold others accountable for a specific task or project, the individual needs to know what is expected of them, right? We can't hold someone accountable if they don't know what they are supposed to be doing. As the very late Dr. Don Clifton from Gallup stated during his revolutionary work and development of strengths psychology, quote, "Nothing happens unless someone expects something of you in ways you can achieve." Now, this last part, in ways you can achieve, takes us to the third element necessary for successful management or leadership, especially during remote work, which is individualized. Great managers have always individualized their approach to the worker. By taking the time to really understand your remote employees, managers need to ask each employee to describe the conditions under which they perform best, and ask their employees about the concerns about their workflow they might be experiencing during remote work, and any emotional response or reactions they have towards the situation we are in right now during this pandemic. So open lines of communication, setting expectations, individualizing duties and tasks to meet the needs and strengths of the individual are so important during management in a virtual. Managers who individualize the duties, tasks, projects to fit an employee's talents allow employees to allow an employee to optimize his or her performance and experience higher levels of engagement in their work. The Clifton Strengths Finder assessment measures the rank order of your 34 talent themes. And talents are a natural way of thinking, feeling, or behaving. The greater the intensity of the talent, the greater its power, and the greater your opportunity for success. So talent is also looked at as a filter. For example, one person may see the big picture in a situation, while another person may closely examine the idea or the concept or the situation. This speaks to the talent of connectedness versus the talent of analysis. So hence, talents are viewed as filters because they filter how we think, feel, and behave. So when we invest time in intentionally using a talent, we develop skills in using that talent and knowledge of how to use the talent, which eventually produces a strength. Talent times investment equals a strength. And Gallup's definition of a strength is the ability to consistently produce a positive outcome through perfect performance on a specific task. So leaders need to individualize duties and tasks to each individual, knowing each individual's talents, strengths. So the power of strengths in work and family. Another quote: "When people understand their strengths and the strengths of their colleagues, they become more confident, collaborative, productive, and less stressed, despite change." Gallup research has demonstrated over and over again the value of applying our strengths on a daily basis. The strengths movement has even entered the mainstream media, folks. With, for example, the Navy SEAL David Goggins, if you haven't heard of him yet, advocating the power of finding your inner strength. And I'd like to add the disclaimer that I do not work for Gallup. I am certified through Gallup as a strengths coach, and I am a huge proponent of strengths coaching because I have seen through my coaching engagement with clients how knowledge of and intentional use of strengths has transformed the way people work and interact with one another, which has brought them greater confidence, productivity, and peace. And I'm always so happy to see those transformations people experience. So each talent, I do have to say, has its power and edge, of course, because it brings some power and edge once you intentionally use your strength towards an endeavor. However, a strength may also get in the way of our well-being and our productivity if that strength is overused or misused. So I wanted to share a couple examples of what that might look like. So for example, someone with a learner strength needs exposure to new information and experiences. In the workplace, a leader may assign an employee with high learner strength to basically research a particular concept or technique and to absorb all that information to then share that knowledge with the rest of the team, which is wonderful. It engages the employee with the learner's strength and also contributes to the team. However, during a pandemic, an individual with a learner's strength may enmesh themselves in articles and podcasts about how to survive the pandemic, which really does fulfill them and engage them and excite them, but it may eventually drain them due to overuse of the strength. Another example, restorative strength needs problems that must be solved and looks for the bug in the system. So applied to the workplace, a leader may assign someone with restorative strength to basically anticipate what may go wrong in a particular situation and help others identify alternative action plans to mitigate the problem. During a pandemic, an individual with restorative strength may be inclined to correct another person's behavior, which may be perceived as critical. And so this individual with the restorative strength should probably be mindful of other people's feelings when delivering their message. So although predominantly applied to the workplace, the strengths phenomena, it can also be applied to the family setting. For example, a family member with high restorative strength may be inclined to tell another family member with a learner strength to stop researching and reading on the internet all day, which may really be a source of resentment and anger for the recipient. So being able to appropriately manage your own strengths and knowing when to use it, when not to use it, or how to use it is the key to strengths development. But knowing our talents and strengths, knowing the talents and strengths of each of your family members will allow for greater appreciation for one another, allocation of duties that fit each family member's natural talents of thinking, feeling, and behaving, along with greater understanding of each other and how best to really interact with one another. So individual strengths can be applied to any endeavor. Like I said, it can be applied to the family, or it could be applied to any endeavor for greater success, engagement, and fulfillment. I wanted us to take a look at the example of applying our strengths to the advice in the preceding slides to make the advice more meaningful and practical for each one. So, for example, the APA recommendation or advice on spending time in nature can be applied differently for each person depending on their strength. Let's look at a couple examples. So analytical strength tends to be logical and objective in approach. They may spend time outside measuring the soil pH needed for each plant, or be motivated to go for a jog each day to track their heart rate. So, we all read all this advice on the internet, not one's a valid source, or one should we follow. The first would be to find the right source. Where is the right source of information? It's usually probably, if it's psychology related, it's always the American Psychological Association. So you read all this advice, which is great, but how do you apply it? Well, the trick is to know your strengths and utilize your strengths to apply it towards an advice or a goal. So a relator might take the advice of spending time in nature differently. They would be more engaged in spending time outdoors if they would spend time going for a jog with a close friend, because they enjoy that one-on-one interaction with their acquaintances. So my concluding comment is, to flourish during COVID-19 pandemic, and perhaps always, we need to establish new routines to give our life and our family members' lives a sense of order, predictability, and structure during these uncertain times. Making sure our routines are aligned to each family member's strength, to ensure positive emotions, engagement, meaning, accomplishment, again, PERMA pillars, while fostering positive and strong relations, the fifth pillar of PERMA, in the family, with loved ones, and with coworkers, as we laugh together, celebrate together, full of joy and appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you, Niary. So let's go over a few things here, because I feel like we have a few questions still up in the air now. Some very useful tips that you were given. I was just admiring them myself. I was thinking, wow, this really can be applicable across the board, be it in school and work, grocery store, you name it. You name it. Yeah. But one thing I was noticing now, because I feel like a lot of people are going to want, the action items, the tangible things that they can walk away from with this. And when I was noticing, of course, there was an abundance here on how to, correspond with them, how to better engage them. I'm also wondering now for the step that comes before that, in just getting to mobilize these people, because of course everyone is now feeling so sluggish, and they're already feeling overwhelmed kind of before they even start. So what recommendations would you give per se to get people activated in that sense? If
activated in regards to getting
in regards to wanting, in regards to, yes, working towards quarantine, wanting to do it, because a lot of what you spoke about, of course, was sort of in the process, right? Yeah, but I'm speaking in terms of actually instigating, that conversation, making that initiative, because people are just feeling so down on themselves that they don't even want to make that first step. So how do they deal with the psychology of that?
Again, just to clarify, taking that first step in reconnecting with the community, is that what I'm hearing?
Is that essentially it could be? More so in advice. You said, for instance, in the beginning when you were talking about the loneliness that people may feel, the music and whatnot that could help them, of course. But of course, people are feeling so much more lonelier, and maybe, I guess, to those people who don't have access to a virtual community, so to speak, where do they get the drive, the motivation, the desire to actually go out and implement these tools that you've given them?
Again, I always go back to the strength. Really knowing your.
I'm sorry, you cut out there. Could you repeat?
Sorry.
It's okay.
I always go back to the strengths, the power of strengths. So again, knowing your strengths and knowing how you use them, and being able to intentionally use them brings a lot of joy and fulfillment. So I highly recommend, whether it's discovering your character strengths via the VIA assessment from Martin Seligman's page, or the Gallup strengths, the Clifton strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So either just really get to know your strengths and be able to purposefully use it will get you out of the rut, get you connected to people, just bring a lot of positivity. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. A good place to sort of grab onto.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we have a question about, as someone who's obviously a professional in the field right now, you have a lot more interaction with this. I'm sure people would like to know, sort of get a gauge of this situation. Do you see sort of the backlash of this or the trouble in the adjustment in your professional arena? Do you see it happening a lot? Is it something that a lot of people are dealing with in your experience, or how would you put it on the spectrum?
Adjusting to working
This
from
new
home?
lifestyle, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's individual specific, honestly,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's completely individual specific. Some people just are flourishing. They're loving it. This stay at home, telework, more time with family. It's like Disneyland for some of them, some people. Some people are struggling with, oh my God, I have too much to do. How do I put order to all this? Right?
Exactly.
So, versus others are just miserable and angry and frustrated because they lost employment and now have to start all over again with a new career. I mean, we're each in a different situation. So there is no one advice for everyone. But the one advice I do have is know your strength and purposefully use it towards solving a problem or making a new connection. Or, when deciding which new career path to go on. I mean, your strengths have a lot of power and edge. And knowing what they are, knowing how you currently use them, and how you can more purposefully use them towards an endeavor, is your guiding light, honestly.
Okay. We got another question here. Now, for all the advice that you've said, what's a good way or some markers, I guess, that we could be looking out for instance, if we're giving the advice? How do we know if the other person can be seeing it as a positive, or maybe they might see it as a criticism, sort of as an attack? What is a good way to sort of structure it so that we can avoid any confrontation or misunderstandings?
Okay. You mean out of goodwill, if someone is giving, if I'm giving someone feedback on...
Right. Yes.
For example, I brought with the restorative strength being prone to identifying problems and telling maybe a person with learner strength, stop researching the internet, for example. Yeah. I mean, delivering our message always in a positive tone, in a more caring fashion, instead of, hey, you should stop, staring at the screen, you're going to go blind. And you should spend more time with me. Like, this is not cool. You have all the time in the world. And why are you on the computer all the time? Instead of being more attacking and...
That pesky word choice.
I don't know. I mean, people can really blow up in this pandemic because they're just fuming with so many emotions that they're not able to process adequately, unfortunately. So instead of lashing out at someone when you're trying to give them some well-noted well-being feedback that looking at the screen is not good for you, you could say it in a very nice way, actually. The lines of something like, I've noticed that you spent a substantial amount of time behind the computer for about a week now, and I love it that you're getting all this information, valuable information and advice, and gaining all the knowledge for you and our family, but I think that it's just not healthy for you. I think it's too much, and I would love it if you spend more time with the entire family instead of with the internet, because I care about you and do love you, and we want to spend time with you too. So you could deliver. It's how you deliver your message, honestly.
And sometimes even elaborating with that thought process, so sort of disarm them a little if they think,
Yes. Okay. Where is your comment or feedback or criticism coming from? That should be noted in your feedback to anyone. Yeah.
Okay. Now, we actually have one last question here, I think. Now, this is all well and done, but now what happens if, let's say, we try and follow this methodology and we're flourishing, and then maybe, let's say, after a week or so, as is sort of normal, we might forget, or we can't keep up with this sort of new structure that we want to implement in our lives. So what's a good way to remind ourselves and to keep it going forward, so to speak?
You mean if the quarantine stay-at-home order continues for the next?
Yeah, well, the order is probably going to continue, at least for the foreseeable future. So, but even after so, because, right, these are things that we can implement always.
Yeah.
So, but how do we remind ourselves so that it really becomes regime and in our lives?
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, the power of strengths. Yeah.
The strengths. We have to give them more credit then, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, as you using them, they just become they're already part of you. Your talents are they're part of you. It's just being able to identify what are they, being able to name them, and being able to purposefully use them, in whatever situation, whether during a pandemic or out of a pandemic, it doesn't matter, And as far as what the PERMA theory is, you could print out, for example, this slide, or, put, a piece of paper in front of your computer with positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning and accomplishment written on it in bold. So you're constantly reminded on a daily basis, hey, I should be using my strengths that I'm very well aware of what they are to create greater positive emotions on a daily basis, to create more engagement, to create stronger relationships, to always find whatever it is that I do, even though it might be the most boring thing I've ever done. And to have that sense of accomplishment on a daily or weekly basis, right? If any of these are missing, that's where your well-being is tanked. Yeah.
Okay, and let's see, I think we have one last question here. So, to best, I guess, phrase this question, I guess the topic of humility comes now into question, so to speak. If we're playing on strength so much, how do we make it so it's not perceived as vanity, so to speak? As if we're not emphasizing, of course, only the good and not going after the bad. Maybe it could be improved, et cetera, et cetera. How do we curb that issue?
Yeah. Well, our strengths, just as I kind of briefly noted, have their power and edge. They're really, really, really power, that they bring for us. But they also
yeah.
But they also have their downfalls that can inhibit our well-being and decrease our levels of performance if used appropriately. If that strength is not used appropriately, so that's a developmental issue right there. Right? And that's what strengths coaching is all about. How can I purposefully use these strengths of mine to achieve my goals while mitigating my strengths from being perceived by others as negative or me misappropriately using a strength in an important situation. So, does that answer the question?
Yes, I think it does.
Our strengths do speak to humility indirectly.
That is true. It just depends on the maneuvering of them, I guess. It's
exactly.
Yeah, that's one thing that everyone can work on now in quarantine is their strengths. How do we go about talking about them?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess that just about wraps up everything, Niary. Thank you very much for your time. It was very insightful, everything you provided.